Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever or whenever you might be, and welcome to Google Next On Air 2020. We're honored and glad to have you watching our Google Cloud Cost Management session, Mastering Your Billing Data and Making It Useful. Now, before we jump in, I want to introduce you to two handsome and wise young gentlemen who are excited to bring you this content. One, of course, yes, I'm biased, is myself, Debo Aderibigbe, and I'm a Google Cloud product manager who focuses on cloud billing, specifically in the areas of monetization and GCP services alongside cost management. I'm also joined by Dany, a partner so amazing, he doesn't really need introduction, but I'll have him do it anyways. Dany?
Hey everyone, I'm Dany Daya. I'm from Etsy. I'm program manager at Etsy and I focus on cloud strategy and operation.
Great. So let's do a small content check. After all, though in some cases you may have more time, your internet time during this COVID-19 period is pretty valuable. So if you care about understanding what is the use of my resources in GCP and what are they costing me, how do I organize cost data so I can do more useful things with it, and how can I draw insight with my cost data that I can share with and inform the right people, then let's take this journey together. This is where you want to be. Now, we're going to explore the questions I just raised in four ways. First, an introduction, or more specifically, how a company like Etsy arrives at managing cost data in the cloud and why it's necessary. We'll then talk about some simple and primary sources of cost data and understand the details of how it gets to you. Then we'll dive into a few use cases and their corresponding interfaces or visual output to help jumpstart you and how you might analyze your cost data and make it useful to you. And then we'll finish with a few tips that you'll want to keep in mind as you're managing your cost data into the future. So let's start at the beginning. Many companies have their reasons for moving into the cloud, and unsurprisingly, alongside the lack of equipment management and heavy IT footprints, cost savings is one of them. Dany's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the start of Etsy's cloud journey. Dany?
Thank you very much, Debo. Let me start by sharing an overview about how Etsy decided to move to the cloud. For those who are not familiar with Etsy, Etsy is a global marketplace for unique and creative goods. It's a home of a universe of special, extraordinary items, from unique handcrafted pieces to vintage treasures. There are more than 2.8 million active sellers on Etsy. And the number that I want to draw your attention to is that we have more than 66 million unique active listings at Etsy. This massive number of active listings require advanced machine learning capabilities and search capabilities to ensure that buyers can find easily what they're looking for on our platform. Such advanced capabilities require more and more infrastructure, and maintaining such infrastructure in data centers would limit Etsy's goal in continuous growth. As a result of that, Etsy started exploring cloud vendors and moving to the cloud. In 2017, Etsy made a strategic decision to move to the cloud. We followed a very complicated decision matrix that contained more than 200 different factors to evaluate different cloud vendors. As a result of that, we decided to move with GCP. If I want to summarize all of those 800 factors in kind of three main takeaways, I would choose number one, scalability. Scalability is the ability to scale on demand. With data centers, you have to plan ahead of time, probably 6 to 9 months ahead, to do activities such as provisioning, purchase of hardware, installing hardware, testing them, and then running them. On the cloud, things are much, much faster. You can do that in significantly shorter time frame. And guess what? You can scale down after you finish using your resources. The second major thing is sustainability. Sustainability is one of the major goals at Etsy. We do track sustainability as we track revenue and profit. We find in Google a partner that is aligned on this topic. GCP commits to carbon neutrality as well as energy efficiency. Also, Google leverages the latest technology to achieve those goals. This commitment made us very comfortable moving forward with Google. The third thing is around creativity and enablement. We want to enable our developers and engineers to be able to use the latest technologies out there in the market in order for them to continue improving our platform and serve our community of buyers and sellers. So The decision was made in 2017. In 2018, we started the migration, and earlier in 2020, we successfully completed this migration. However, I would like to share with you and highlight some of the non-engineering changes that we went through. The first thing is the change in the type of the cloud cost itself. The cost on the cloud is variable, and it's very easy for developers and engineers to spend additional resources, which will lead to additional cost. On the contrary, in a data center world, the costs were more or less predictable and managed by specific folks in engineering and finance. And at the end of the day, the availability of the resources were limited by the capacity of the data center. The second change is associated with how we purchase cloud resources. If you want to think about it, in a cloud world, every developer or engineer have the ability to spend additional resources. In a way, we are having a decentralized procurement of cloud resources, where in the past, everything was centralized between few folks within engineering and finance. The third change is kind of a result of the prior two, is basically the need of visibility. With the increased number of users, and all of those users have different use cases and needs for visibility, we found ourselves that we have to provide more visibility into where the cost is coming from on the cloud. All of that required us to follow sort of a decentralized cloud budget, governance, and forecasting methods. One of the ways to handle these challenges is to adopt some of the cloud cost governance or management approaches. And I'll hand over back to Debo now to walk you through some of those approaches.
Thank you, Dany, for that great lead-in. It brings us back full circle to the 4 pillars that really define Google Cloud Cost Management. The first, of course, is visibility. That means that we provide you a strong sense of transparency through our interfaces, documentation, and APIs to help you be able to find and understand your costs and your usage. With accountability, it means that we enable you to organize and allocate your costs in ways that align accountability and budgets for the appropriate business units that you have in your company, or cost centers, or teams, whatever makes the most sense. Control, of course, means that you can make costs more predictable with tools that help you forecast, budget, and essentially mitigate risk. And finally, intelligence. That means we give you recommendations and optimizations to help you, at core, save money, because who doesn't want to do that? And so now that we've talked a little bit about how Google Cloud Cost Management works and how Etsy has really gotten to this point, let's talk a little bit more about data sources. Hopefully you agree that cost management in the cloud is very important. Let's take a look at where that data comes from. If we simplify, there are 3 main simple methods to take a look at your costs and billing data. In just a moment, we'll dig deeper into each, but we of course have the GCP invoice and statements. We have the UI and the billing console that contains reports, tables, and views. And then finally, we have the GCP BigQuery billing export, the most granular and frequently updated source of data in this group of 3. Accessible from the Google Cloud Console, we have the GCP statements and invoices on the documents page. With few exceptions, if you set up as an invoiced account, you'll see these once a month on the 5th day in the month following the month that you were using your GCP services. Your invoice contains information about you, such as business addresses, tax IDs, as well as taxes or payments for usage made within the month. On it, the duration of the invoice month, you'll see the highest level of aggregation of costs and products and SKUs in terms of your cost information. If you're looking for basic cost data that can be handled and handed over to finance, accounting, and legal for simple bottom line numbers, this may be enough. But as they say, if you give a mouse a cookie, they're probably going to want a glass of milk. So the billing console and cost management is where you're going to go. The billing console has a number of interface experiences that help you to slice and dice your data appropriately. This includes interfaces such as the cost overview to see cost trends at a glance, the cost table, which serves as a more manipulable form of your invoice, and cost reports, which allow you to filter, aggregate, and zero in on specific attributes to do analysis. The key insight I want you to take away here is that the things you're able to do in the billing console are the greatest common denominator amongst many types of customers and companies that we serve. We realize that one size doesn't fit all, and so we're working constantly to make sure that we improve our views to make sure that they fit most people. Now, when you really need to go custom, or you're missing a particular view or insight that you want to take advantage of, that's when you want to go to the Billing BigQuery export. And hint, you're going to hear me say this more than once, you got to turn it on. It is an enabled feature, so turn it on to make sure that you have it. You're going to thank me later. The Billing BigQuery export enables you to export detailed Google Cloud billing data, such as usage, pricing, and cost estimate data, automatically through the day to a BigQuery dataset that you specify. You can then do all kinds of things with it. You can query it directly for a specific insight, or you could use additional tools to build and visualize data and look at dashboards. You might also export data to other formats such as JSON or CSV to do other programmatic manipulations. Think of it as the most customizable form of your billing data. Now, in the billing and monetization team at GCP, we take the data in and it flows like this. We get usage at different intervals depending on which GCP service you're talking about, such as GCS, our storage service, Kubernetes engine, or compute engine. And in a simplified sense, we take that data in and tally up the total usage we've received and determine how much it should cost based on a number of factors, such as price, discounting, and other modifications. That information then takes multiple paths. For one, we have a path to payments to prepare invoices, and then we also have two paths to our reporting engine for usage of the UI, and then also the indexing engine to make sure that we display and export respectively. Now, note that for what matters to you, the export updates more frequently. Taking one more minute to talk about that export, one of its most special powers is its flexibility. Oh my, another hint? Maybe you should turn it on. Beyond the ability to write SQL queries to integrate very, very well with your other visualization products, you can use tools like Data Studio or Looker or Tableau to visualize this data in a way that makes it more effective to share with others instead of having to go directly into the BigQuery tables and partitions to understand the insights that you'd like to share. Now, it's also a source for third-party integrators. So if you're looking to use a integrator like Cloud Health, you might be able to give them these insights through your BigQuery so they can provide more multi-cloud insights for you. In the end, the BigQuery billing export is very versatile. So we've talked about where your data comes from, and I suppose it's time that we think about crawling, walking, and running with specific use cases that more match up to your everyday views of how you deal with cost data. How do we make sense of all this? For a single use case, let's go back to one of the key questions that we started with. How can I organize my cost data and make it easier to manage? Well, to answer that question, we got to start with a crawl. And that crawl portion of this use case means understanding that we like to call here at Google Cloud the flexible billing hierarchy. The billing hierarchy starts at the top with the billing account. It's one of your largest and most important containers for cost data. We say that because it's the level responsible for paying for all of the resources you use at GCP services. So it's a fairly large container that you can use to assign to costs. Underneath that is a folder level. It's commonly mapped to larger business units and cost centers, such as DevOps or engineering. And then you move on to the project level. This is the most common container for resources directly because it's a good scoping mechanism for individual teams or for resources that you want to keep together so you could do other things, like set access policies or label. Below these are resources, and examples of resources include things like databases, Kubernetes clusters, and virtual machines. Remember that a resource can have one and only one project. So if you want a way to identify resources that span projects, you'll want to make effective use of labels. Really metadata that you could use for, among many other reasons, costing your resources and identifying them together. Once you've understood all this, you can start to walk. All walking involves here is diving into some of the billing console changes that you might find in terms of attributes of your data. And if you'd like to see it in a specific way or to your liking, you can use some of the filters that appear in our interfaces in cost management. So whether it's something like timing, usage or export time, location, the region your resources are running in, or other types of locations, or container level, project or folder, you can filter to make the view expose the information that you need. And you can do quite the same with the export, except that it's a little bit different of a format and interface. Here, if we take a brief look at the BigQuery interface, you can see that you can write queries to find very specific information that's custom to your needs. And in the resulting data sets, you can see all or just a few of the attributes in the table schema that you want to see, from the billing account to usage to cost data, right on down to labels. But these are just some of the basics. Once you have all the data, you can really run. Let's switch over to Dany so you can get an idea of what advanced cost management looks like specifically for Etsy.
Thank you very much, Debo. Actually, before we start running, I want to highlight one thing. The console, Google native GCP console that Debo mentioned, is really powerful. And I personally love using it, especially when it comes to forecasting your future spend. It has a lot of features that I encourage all of you to go try it. However, at Etsy, we have big number of people using GCP, and all of those people are interested in knowing their cost and understanding it better. To build such tools to enable us to monitor at scale, we had to rely on two major inputs. The first one, as you heard Debo mentioning, the billing export, which include a lot of the data on the billing that's happening on Google's side. So as Debo mentioned, please turn it on if you plan on using it in the future. The second thing is something we are calling it as business inputs that are specific to Etsy. Think about stuff like a budget, like a team, how our folders how GCP projects are grouped together under one team or cost center. And I'll walk you through an example of that in a bit. We take those two inputs, we merge them in BigQuery, then we export the output to Looker. And Looker is a tool that will enable us to slice and dice the data as we like, and I'm going to walk you through those details in a bit. So when I talk about business inputs, what am I talking about really? I'm sharing here with you a couple of examples. The first one is mapping GCP projects to business units or teams or cost centers. So what you're seeing here is one row representing all of our, or actually one column representing all of our GCP projects. And the second column is representing all of the teams or business units that are running or owning that specific GCP project. Another example is assigning a specific budget for each business unit. Again, we assign budgets on monthly basis. Your organization might be doing it on quarterly basis or annual basis. The goal here is just to show you how we can merge all of this data together with the billing data. One thing that always popped to my mind is what is the difference between the labeling and what Debo presented and what we are talking about here at Etsy. In my opinion, those are kind of the same thing. It's just like at Etsy, we decided to not burden our engineers with the task of maintaining and labeling and continuing to label resources as things change. We decided to keep that centralized under the program management team. What kind of output we are looking at when it comes to Looker? The first thing is we send automated emails to the different stakeholders who have interest in GCP cost. Such emails notification could include a variety of data. What we are looking here is a sample of one of those graphs included in the daily emails. In fact, this graph, it shows the account daily spent broken down by GCP service versus the budget. So each column in this graph represents the daily GCP spend. Furthermore, we break each daily spend by the GCP service. And in this case, we are looking at different colors, each color representing a different GCP service. The green is for Google Compute. The orange is for cloud storage. And if you can see, there is a light vertical black line. This line represents the daily budget. Whenever a column exceeds that line, it means we have a budget overrun. Whenever the column is below that budget line, it means we have a budget surplus on that specific date. Now, this is another interesting thing I want to highlight to you. Once you have all of this data in Looker, it becomes very easy to visualize this data in different ways. And for a person like me, who is not a big fan of querying and coding, Looker comes very, very handy and useful to me. With Looker, I can apply specific filters and change specific selections to transfer the graph that we looked at earlier into this graph, which is the daily cost, daily GCP cost. But rather than looking at the account total, we are looking at a specific business unit. And rather than looking at breakdown by GCP service, we are looking at breakdown by GCP project. So an engineering manager could look at this graph and be able to track the spend of every project within his or her organization. With that, I'm going to hand back to Debo to talk more about some of the more advanced Google monitoring tools.
Thanks, Dany. Those graphs are pretty cool and they're informative. So let's kind of stay on the subject of budget since you brought us there. And you're probably asking yourselves out there in the audience, is there anything I can do in GCP to not just budget, but give insights on how our budgets are doing and performing and inform the people who need to know about them? It's a great question. And we do have a little bit to help you here in GCP. In fact, GCP Cost Management gives you a place to do it in a fundamental way. You can set budgets through the budgets interface in the billing console. And when you're ready to walk with this data, you can set things like automated alerts. You can set things like cloud functions that will manipulate your resources when thresholds are reached. And you can get and set these budgets with APIs and compare that budget information to what you have in your usage and cost data that you've gotten from your billing BigQuery export. But Dany and Etsy are once again way ahead of the curve. They've played with these features and I think they love them. Dany can confirm that one for you. But they've gone a little bit further to develop strategies that work well for their business. Dany, why don't you show us what Etsy does when you're running with that data?
Yep, let's do that. So I'm going to walk you through 3 different approaches or 3 different layers of tracking the variation or the trends in our GCP spend. The first one, I look at it as an account level. So what you are looking at here on this graph is the daily as well as month-to-date variation from budget. So if you look at the orange bars, what those orange bars represents is the daily variation from budget. If the bar is above 0, it means we have a budget overrun. And some of you might be like, okay, what does that even mean to me? I'll try to explain it to you. So if you look at this graph, you can see in the first few days of the month, we were having positive orange bars. However, at one point, we realized at Etsy that this is something that's not a good trend and we don't want that. So we went in and investigated what's the cause of that budget overrun. And we realized that this is not the best way of investing our money. So we ended up killing some of the workflows that are causing this budget overrun. And this is reflected in this graph in kind of the middle where you see that the orange bars are now negative, which means that we have a budget surplus on a daily level. And also it's represented in the green line that reflects the monthly variation as a percent from the budget. It started high because we were significantly above budget, and it starts going down towards the end of the month, which is what we intended on doing. You can imagine that people at finance and accounting would appreciate this kind of graph because they love tracking budgets. But this graph might not be super actionable for engineering managers who are interested more at the project level. So for this kind of audience, I lately introduced a new dashboard that shows the daily variation of cost at a project level. So if you look at the upper graph here, you are seeing all the projects, or actually the top 15 or 10 projects that have the biggest change day to day. And the bars represent whether the budget or the cost of this project increased day to day or decreased. This information can come very useful for engineering managers and guide them to the point or the project that's causing the budget variation. They might not need to take any corrective actions, but the data is there for them. The second graph, and again, this is one of the beautiful features with Looker, is giving similar information here, but rather than looking at the project level, we are looking at the business unit level. And rather than looking at the daily change, we are looking at the monthly change. So this graph provides input for a director to be able, or like a VP probably, to be able to understand which business unit is changing its spend month over month. All of those gives us an idea about finance, or like whole level, account level, project level. But in reality, the most important part in this hierarchy are the individuals who are actually running the workflows. And although the title on the slide says run, I need to tell you that this is a sprint. This is a lot of data that we combine together. The first two we talked about earlier, the billing export as well as the business input from Etsy. The third one that we introduce here is resource labeling. So why are we introducing resource labeling? The reason why we introduce resource labeling is that we have different developers using the same GCP project. And within each project, each developer or product initiative is using specific resources. So we need to associate that specific resource with the individual or the product initiative that is using it or spinning that resource. And for that, we use a specific automated tooling to provide this labeling. Once we have all of this data, again, we merge it together in Looker, we are able to visualize this heat map, which shows the trailing 5-day cost for all of those workflows that are either associated with an individual or with a specific product initiative. Also, we are using color coding. The color coding makes it much easier for people to spot any changes and anomalies. In this case, if for example, one row that's representing a specific developer, their color has always been green. If one day their color is now red, it means they are spending more and they need to at least analyze what's happening. They might not need to take any corrective actions because some of that spend is expected and we want it to happen. So now that I gave you an overview about how we track and trend the budget variation at Etsy, I want to be very clear and realistic in setting expectations. It took us a long time to set and put all of those monitoring tools in place. Understanding and mastering the cloud in general, the cloud billing, is not an easy task. So it took us time, and I would like to share with you some of the lessons that Etsy learned through this journey. The first one is try to focus on one service at a time. Depending on your account size and your level of understanding of cloud cost and cloud management, it might be really overwhelming to try to understand everything at the same time. So my tip for you is try to focus on the main cost drivers first. And that could be either GCP service or a specific project. Once you have a better understanding of those, try to scale them to the tail of the spend. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is test any monitoring or any reporting with stakeholders. At the end of the day, you might have different stakeholders. Each of them might want different things to focus on. So it's really important to get those people aligned and hear their feedback when you are doing your reporting and monitoring. At the end of the day, they are the end users of this product, and you want to make sure that they are on board with it. The third thing is iterate and innovate. Cloud cost management, it's not a one-time action. As long as you are using the cloud, you will have to revisit your monitoring and reporting tools. There might be a lot of reasons why you might have to do that. I'm just going to mention one example, which happened lately with us. Google introduced a new product, which is BigQuery reservation. And again, it's a product that many users need to use it. And we realized that we need to reflect to them and show the users how much they are spending. So we had to go back to our worker and try to slice and dice this data again to make it available for them. With time, you realize you become more familiar with it and you are very easier for you to build those dashboards.
Well, thanks, Dany, for all the work that you've done and sharing what your running style is with Etsy and working with your cost data to make it especially useful for you. I have a little bit of parting advice to supplement that information that Dany is giving you to make sure that you get the most out of your cost data as you continue on that lifelong journey, or maybe not lifelong, but at least as long as you're working with that business, to make sure that you get the cost data to be correct and accurate and useful. So the first, again, I promised you I was going to say it several times, turn Billing BigQuery Export on. It's an extremely useful data set. And in terms of making sure that you have it available for you from the beginning of your cloud journey to wherever you may be now in the present and into the future, it has to be enabled so that you can generate the data set and have it appear where you need it to be. Secondly, you should analyze your cost detail and reports instead of using the invoice for analysis. I've heard it commonly amongst many customers that they looked at the invoice to try to get a better sense of whether or not their costs were accurate. But really, we've even got a cost detail table that actually mimics very closely the amount of information that's in the invoice and then allows you to selectively filter and look at more granular versions of that data to the point where it's going to help you and be more accurate and active at the moment in given time that you're looking at it. Then, of course, we want to make sure you have a labeling strategy. You'll really thank me for this one later. Labeling allows you to cross-cut and deliver certain attributes upon which you would like to make sure that there's accountability and cost data specifically tagged to. So make sure that your labeling strategy has a little bit of flexibility so that if your business change, let's say you go through a reorg or you need to do something new in terms of the applications you develop, that your labeling strategy is not so pigeonholing, but you can't change it and still have it tell you the type of cost data that you need. Then watch out for querying gotchas. I hear it often from customers that they looked at usage time instead of the time of export, which is almost a slice of time where you're querying to see when the data was exported, as opposed to what was driving its costs at the time that it was used. So make sure you use the right one when you're actually writing your queries, so look closely. And finally, create a query library. You'll find that sometimes when you're using tools like Looker or Tableau, that a query is the basis of a window into the information or a view that you want to create that will eventually become a dashboard as that information matures. So if you can keep a collection of those things, they'll always remain useful for you in terms of making decisions later about what you'd like to do and who you'd like to share that data with. So with that, we come to our close. There's plenty you can learn about cost management, and we hoped that you learned a lot from hearing from us today. But just in case you couldn't get enough, we do have another session about what's new in cost management in the cloud, CST 101, that I hope you take a look at. And below on the slide, I've given you several resources that might help you more familiarize with cost management in general and Looker and other tools that might be useful for you in your cost management journey. But in the meantime, I want to make sure that I thank you, the audience, for giving us your eyeballs and your ears and your time, and say this is Debo signing off. And Dany, hope you get to say goodbye too.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you very much, Debo, and please be safe.
Yep, thank you very much. And thanks once again for joining us in Google Next On Air 2020. Goodbye, everyone.